Well, hey there, Brittany. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Confident Sober Women podcast. I'm so glad to have you and to have this conversation for our audience. I just know they're going to enjoy it as well. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to chat.
Yes, so thanks for having me. First of all, I'm so excited. My story. Okay, so it goes, all the way back to the beginning, really. I was born into a family that had two parents that grew up with addiction and abandonment and all of those things. And I think really from the start, addiction was going to find its way into my life one way or another. And I kind of just grew up seeing unhealthy coping mechanisms and definitely a lot of generational trauma that was passed down. My dad actually passed away when my sister and I were really young. And from there, it was just like me and my sister and my mom. And my mom suffered from her own addictions and had her own demons she was battling. But she, tried her best with me and my sister. But ultimately, we both kind of ended up in like the party scene at a very young age. And my mom, I guess, kind of was trying to be more friends with us than parents. So we didn't really have that authority in our life. We had a mom that would hang out and let us have parties at our house and all that stuff. So from a young age, we just thought it was so normalized to drink alcohol. And so I want to say I was like probably 14 or 15 when I first discovered alcohol. And when I did, it was really like, oh, wow, like, this kind of gives me an out. It numbs all the pain and all the things I don't want to talk about, but it also kind of allowed me at the same time to have like different conversations that I would never dare have when I was sober. So it kind of freed me and numbed me at the same time. So it was like a double-edged sword. And really from there on, like normal high school stuff, you're doing that every weekend, and then you get to college and that ramps up. And yeah, I really relied on alcohol for a lot of things, just like social crutch and to make friends and to feel more comfortable and confident and all that stuff that you think it's giving you. It's all false, but that's what I was really dependent on. And then you get older and you kind of surround yourself with those same type of drinkers, those same type of people. So a lot of binge drinking, and like many people, once I started drinking, like I just didn't have an off switch. And that's kind of the way it spiraled. But everyone around me, all my neighbors, all my other friends, we were all doing the same thing. So you don't really realize there's a problem, or you don't really realize anything is going on until, like later on after I started having children and kind of realizing I didn't want to perpetuate that same cycle that I grew up with. And I wanted to create a more stable environment for my kids. And just, I was never going to be the mom I wanted to be if I kept drinking the way that I always drank. So, but I kind of had to come to that honest slap in the face realization before I made any changes. And now I am like 20 months sober and life is beautiful. And yeah, parenting is definitely a lot easier now, sober with a clear mind, and just the patience and the presence is definitely there. And it's just a lot more, it's a wild ride still, don't get me wrong. Like I have 3 crazy kids, but it's a lot more enjoyable and a lot easier. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Brittany, and for being so vulnerable and honest with us. This is truly how it works, right? We spread the message of hope and recovery. And my whole passion and mission in my life and my work is to normalize not drinking and to also help women learn how to thrive in long-term recovery, because just because we got sober doesn't mean that we're well. And there's a lot of work to be done beyond that first year of early recovery and well beyond that. So congratulations on your 20 months. That's incredible. And you're
Thank
definitely in
you.
that spot, right? Like you're past that kind of 1 year mark and you're well into your second year now. And I would imagine doing a lot of the quote unquote work, right? The sobriety work. So I'm curious because you didn't
Right.
mention it, like, is there something that you used to get and stay sober, like a program or something else that helped you, or how did you do that?
I didn't get into a program. I just didn't go that route for whatever reason. My sister, so when I first became sober, my sister was the only other person that I knew that was sober. And I didn't really know what to do, but I like am the type of person that I just like jump in with both feet and everything. And I'm just like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I've come to this decision. And I, at first, I started just implementing small changes into my life. Like I would wake up earlier and try to meditate and drink hot lemon water and do yoga and all these things that were helping me mentally. And also just, I felt physically better when I was doing those things. So those things, they were small steps, but they helped me immensely. And I still do them to this day. And then something else that really helped me was Quit Lit literature on people who have become sober, or recovery stories from other people. I was just like, I want to know other people's stories there, and they really inspired me. But I did start, that was another thing that I implemented, like going to bed early and with my cup of tea and my books. And those authors were like my best friends, like my lifeline early on. And I was just like so inspired by all the stories that I was reading, and just thought, if like these people can do this, I can do this. And just really, it was just started with small steps like that. And then eventually I was like, okay, I kind of kept myself in a little bubble. And like most people that are early on in sobriety, you don't really want to go to the same places, or you don't want to hang out with the same people because you don't want to be triggered. You don't want to be pressured into anything. And you kind of just feel a little uncomfortable in your own skin. So kind of staging myself in the beginning. And then eventually I was like, okay, I need to connect with people. And that's really been just so helpful to me. I actually started a company, like an event company called Sober Sisters Events, geared towards the sober and recovery community. And because I just didn't know any other way to meet sober people, I just had no clue. I was like, is there like a sober friend app? I don't know how do you meet other sober people? I had no idea. Like other than the online groups that I was a part of, I just did not know how to meet other sober moms or just anybody in real life. So I started it in hopes that it would be also like my saving grace to meeting people. And it has been totally. So it was for me, so it was kind of selfish in a way, because I was like, I need friends. But it's just helped me knowing that other people have a place to go where they can hang out and have fun and meet like-minded people. And we're all in like a safe, inclusive space where we know alcohol is just not going to be present. It's not going to be the sole focus like it is at a lot of other places that you go. So it's just been a really great outlet and something positive in my life. And that kind of just also is more motivation for me to keep going and keep sharing my story.
That's amazing. I
Yeah,
love that because sometimes like the best way to help ourselves and to like start, something business or otherwise is to do what we didn't have or what we need. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did, which is
right.
really awesome. So
Yeah.
I'm curious about your kids. So how old are they?
8, 4, and 3.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
the
oh, so
4 and
your
the 3-year-old
little,
are 11 months apart, so super close in age.
so your little one was only one when you got sober.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that
She
was a,
will never know. Drinking mommy.
yay. Wow, that must be so nice. Cause like you mentioned, it's so different than the experience you had growing up.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in an environment where like I first of all I took care of my little sister a lot of the time and just tried to like protect her and guide her. So a lot of like my childhood was kind of taken away from me because I was
Right.
put into like a more of a parenting role for her.
Mhm.
Um and just the feel, like you feel when you're in an environment where your parents drinking or doing whatever and they're out of control in different times, you just feel unsafe and
Mhm.
it's not fun as a kid. You're scared, and I just never wanted my kids to have that on them. It was such like
Yeah.
a big burden, and I didn't want them to have any of those worries. I just wanted them to be kids and enjoy their life and be able to like make their own mistakes and grow and all of those things. And yeah, so I'm just trying to create that safe space for them, where they don't have any of those worries, because that was definitely a lot as a kid. And for sure, a lot of that has played into who I am today, which is a lot of positives as well. But, like you don't always have to go the hard route to be strong and brave and all of those
Mhm.
things, you know? So
Right.
it's really important to me to just give them that gift, which
Mhm.
they don't even know the difference, which is also another beautiful thing.
Oh gosh, it is such a beautiful thing. And
Mhm.
it's so I think it's so I mean it's hard because that was your childhood, of which I'm sure there was parts of that that were very, like you mentioned, sad and kind of like felt scary, and that's hard as an adult to like look back and think that that's your experience. However, it is such a cool thing, I think, very much when we can see, when we are parents and we can see that direct difference between who we are as moms compared to how we were raised by our moms. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's very dramatic, in some families, maybe like yours, it's very dramatic. And sometimes it's a little more subtle. And it might just be like, oh, maybe like you had a mom that wasn't really good at like emotional support or validating, and like now you've worked really hard on healing your own trauma or whatever, and so now you can really be there for your kids to like help them understand their emotions and like let them be who they are and validate those experiences. And then sometimes it's just much more dramatic, and either way, I think it's such a great thing to know and to have that distinction about, because oftentimes, and maybe you can relate to this, I know I can, as moms, we feel like we're not doing a good job, or
Mhm.
I'm not a good mom, or I don't want to be like my mom, or like I don't want my child to have that same feeling I had. And so if that is the case, or when those times come up, because I do think it probably happens to all of us at some point, and some of us maybe a lot, we want to have that, we want to be able to understand how we're different. And so being able to recognize that for you, I think is so
Mhm.
important for you to be able to be like, but I'm not like that. My
Right.
children will never have to worry about my sobriety, or
Mhm.
my oldest child will never have to worry about taking care of the younger ones unless I've specifically asked them to, like they're babysitting or there's a thing,
Right. Yeah.
and that's profound in
Yeah.
the when we think about the generations. And so like um the interjection of your sobriety now has changed the entire trajectory of your generational line. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is powerful just to know that within yourself, because I mean, it's every mom, of course, is going to question themselves and think they're not doing the best job. really, I think that means that you are doing a great job if you're questioning yourself and saying to yourself, like, am I doing enough? Am I enough for them? Are they happy? Are they this? Are they that? Like, questioning those things means that you are a good mom. But you're always going to doubt yourself in times. And then you have that to lean back on, like, look at all the work I've done on myself. And I am, you know, this is definitely like a positive influence in their life that's going to change the rest of their lives. So you may not get it right every day, and you're always going to make mistakes, but definitely working on yourself in those ways and knowing that it just gives you that much more confidence as a mom.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like I mean, like my mom's generation and her mom's generation, they weren't doing the work. Like they didn't know how to do that. They weren't given the proper tools. They didn't have the resources, and they were just kind of like doing the best that they could with what they had. And yeah, it was no different for my parents or grandparents, but somewhere along the line, you have to break that generational trauma.
Right.
And it's definitely hard to be a parent working on yourself at the same time, trying to raise people, but
Yeah.
it's so worth it because you're going to change the trajectory of their lives forever. So
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It is challenging for sure. And for a variety of reasons, depending on your family and and your community and whatever else is going on, but it's definitely worth it. There's always Ed Mylett, he's a guru that I love so much. He's just so profound. And he always talks about, or maybe even it wasn't even him that coined the phrase, but he talks about it like in every family there's like the one, like the Matrix,
yep.
like there's the one who like kind of gets up and out, right? Who changes dramatically the trajectory of the family. And I don't think that we need to say that in a way that feels like we're better than, or like we're some superhero or something, but I think it's a nice acknowledgement to be able to know that for yourself, like internally, and also to use it as a drive forward. Like, this is why I'm doing this. So on your worst day, when you're crying in your bathroom because you're completely depleted and you need help and you're just like, want someone to be there and there's no one there, you can just remind yourself that, like, look, I'm the one doing this work. I'm the one
Yes.
showing up, and I'm being sober, and I'm doing this thing because I want my kids to have it a little different. And that, I think, is just a powerful tool and mantra or whatever to have in your toolbox to be able to like pull out, because I mean, it is very taxing and it's exhausting. And not to mention, you're also, I think you're married, right?
Yes.
Trying to
Mm-hmm.
maintain a marriage, you're trying to build a
Mm-hmm.
business. I mean, we're never doing anything in a vacuum. So we don't get to just parent these kids and not do anything else. Like, you're always doing
Right.
it with all of these other things around you. And so it's very taxing. And
Yeah.
we need to have those kind of reminders built inside of ourselves, and that internal locus of control, to be able to say, like, I'm okay, and that's the joy that you get to build when you stay sober over time. I'm curious, as we're talking, I'm thinking about it, like, as you're starting to kind of get really comfortable in your own sobriety, and now your kids are, like a little bit older. If you can, and as you think back to your ages, like your age when you were their ages now, and your mom,
Yeah.
she was with you. I'm just curious if you've been able to, like, because you mentioned things like she always, like, as teenager, she like kind of treated you like a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Are there some specific things that you can really see? Like, what are you doing different? Like, what are you noticing that you're doing or not doing, I guess, with your
Yeah.
kids, or even maybe with your
I'm
husband, or just in your family life?
yeah. I mean, first of all, I have like boundaries with my children that are healthy boundaries, and they know for sure, like, there's a lot of love there, but there's also rules, and I'm not your best friend. And like, that's not my job here. My job is to keep you safe and make sure you're a good human, and like, we'll have fun in between.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was never, I never I I didn't have rules or boundaries as a child. I didn't know where that line was. So, I was actually like semi good kid. I, drank early and all of that stuff, but I was kind of like a rule follower. And I was just like, lucky you, mom, because she didn't give me any rules or anything. Like I could have gone anywhere, done anything, anytime with whoever, and gotten into a lot more trouble than I actually did. So, but yeah, just rules and boundaries. And then also, my mom had just a hard time with, like, we definitely knew we were loved and we were told a lot that we were loved, but as far as hard conversations or about our emotions, we didn't have that at all. Like my mom had a hot button and it would be anger and explosive, and we wouldn't have any follow-up conversations to any of those things. So we didn't really, that can go like one of two ways. I think that you either learn to use anger as your main emotion, or you just like shut down in certain situations. And I definitely would learn from that, just to shut down. And so I didn't know how to handle my emotions or tap into them or express them. And as an adult, that still is like the number one thing that I'm working on through therapy and other things. Just being able to say and articulate how I feel and knowing that that's okay to do that. We weren't taught that. So I'm trying to also, while healing myself and learning how to do that myself, leaving it open for my children to express how they feel without being criticized or, reprimanded for that. So the emotional maturity and awareness that they have is like completely different than where I was when I was a kid. Those are just a couple things that are different. There are a lot of differences in my parenting style versus my mom's that could go on and
Yeah.
on, honestly. But
I mean, I can totally imagine that there are. I'm curious if you could say more about the emotional piece with specifically with your kids. Like, how is that playing out? Because I love this part, and um, I think it's more valuable than we could possibly say with words, and really you won't know until your kids are a little bit older. And I can speak
yeah,
to some of the results because my kids are a lot older than yours, and um, I'm starting to see some of the fruits of our labor, right? Like
hmm,
we have like a ways to go, but there are definitely some of it there. And so I'm curious, like, what are you doing? What are you specifically doing differently? Like you with your parents, and like what are you teaching your kids, and like how are they responding?
yeah. I think one of the main things that I try to make a point to do is, if I've had like a bad day and I am irritated or like short with them or extra snappy or whatever it may be, because we all have those days, then I come back around to them and just really apologize and say, like, I'm just a human, I'm not perfect. None of us are. Like, we all have these emotions and it's okay to have them. And apologizing if I, raise my voice or whatever it may be. And I never, as a child, got an apology for anything. So that was like not a normal thing to hear. Like an adult apologize to a child was not a thing. So I think just admitting that, we all make mistakes. I was wrong, and humanizing that in a way that they know that it's a safe space for them to make mistakes and all of that too. And I have a really open dialogue with them, and I see them coming to me, especially my 8-year-old now. He's just becoming a lot more aware and all of those things that happen as you get older. He just feels really comfortable coming to me and having open, honest conversations about anything, whether it be like things that are happening at school or a way that I made him feel or any of those things. He feels really safe to come to me and have those conversations. So I know something is working there with, creating that kind of open forum with him and being vulnerable with him. He feels safe to do the same. So I can already see it paying off in that way. As a child, I just kept all of my emotions inside and I never talked about them. And he definitely doesn't do that. Now that could just be like more of his personality to be outward and communicative and all of those things. But I love that he feels safe enough in our relationship to do that. So yeah, I'm going to continue to have that open dialogue with them and just being honest about how I'm feeling and letting them know it's okay for them to have, emotions and bad days and all of that stuff too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I love that. And I totally understand and relate to that experience
Yeah.
around not having, never having an apology. I was raised by parents. My parents are definitely like baby boomers who are, not into validating feelings or apologizing to children for sure. And I remember that experience, um, with my oldest one for sure. Like it was very humbling for me to
Mm-hmm.
have to be like, go to her and do that. And I did not like that personally. Like I just
Mm-mm.
did not like that at all because like I said, I was raised by like kind of like my mom was in charge, like she was the authority. I'm the mom. This is what it is. And there's nothing really wrong with that. But yes, like that circle back experience and being able to come back and say, I really shouldn't have treated you like that, or I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have spoken that way. Um, it for me, it was very challenging in the beginning, but then it became more, I'm not saying it was easy, but like it became more routine, like with
Mm-hmm.
time to be able to just be like, "Ugh, man, totally messed up. And
Yep.
and I love it too because it's just modeling. All that is yes,
Right.
we're like doing the right thing, but we're also modeling for them like this is how this works. When you mess up, you circle back and you kind of you own it and you just say like, "Hey, look, I did that wrong. I'm super sorry. Like, will you forgive me?" or whatever you say.
Mm-hmm.
And it also kind of creates like, um, I feel like almost like a safety net feeling of like, we're okay, like it's okay because we can always come back around, like
Yes.
there's nothing we do necessarily is like permanent damage. Yes, our words matter. Yes, we can hurt people and they won't forget it, but like we can always come back and do the right thing. And
Right.
that's
And
hard
we
for me
always
to
come
kind
back to a place of love and understanding, like no
of.
matter what, we're always going to have each other's back. We're always going to be here for each other, but we're going to
Yeah.
screw up and make mistakes along the way.
Mhm.
Right. And for me too, same thing that you
Yeah.
said, it was painful, like to have to do
Yeah.
that in the beginning, like
No.
just because I never saw anybody apologize like that or own what they had done or take accountability. So when it came time, and I still struggle with it, even in my marriage and stuff like that, admitting like, okay, I'm wrong. And like, I have to
Yeah.
say that, but it's like gritting my teeth saying it.
I
I
know.
am
I know.
sorry. But
I
yeah, the
know.
more you do it's like any other skill. Like the more you do it, the more comfortable you feel. And then, yeah, you're just modeling that same thing to your children. So
Yeah. It is
yeah, it's
amazing.
tough, but
It is tough, but like it does, and I mean, and we shouldn't just be doing it all the time either. But women get a bad rap for constantly saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, like that. We don't want to be like that either. We do still want to establish ourselves as like a leader in our family. And so
right.
we hopefully aren't doing things that need to be apologized for that often. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing that I think is really important that I definitely want to make sure we talk about and recognize is I love how you talked about healthy boundaries. And you know, that is such an important phenomenon. I think that in our coming up years, and and then also in our own lives, and specifically in our sobriety, and then also in our parenting. But it doesn't get depending on who you are, where you came from, it doesn't get shown to us very well. I think that we've come into a better, in my opinion, like we've come into a better understanding of this thing in the last couple of generations, and I'm like starting to do this better and better, and it's becoming much more of like mainstream language, call it
Right.
rules, call it whatever expectations, whatever words you want to use, but truly what it means is like creating healthy boundaries, and the sooner that we can start to do this with our kids, like even from like the baby stuff, and everybody's different. I don't even know what the rules are now because my youngest is almost 17, but they change all the time. But like everyone's a little different around like, for example, like maybe if you're a nursing mom and like Does the baby co-sleep with you, or do you let the baby cry it out? Like, or,
Oh,
are you weaning the baby? Are they doing it themselves? Everyone has different kind of ways of that. And I don't like it. That's none of my business. Like, that's for you to decide. But whatever
right.
that is, when you decide like, hey, this is how we do this in our family,
Mm-hmm.
that's creating a boundary. And so you're
Yep.
basically teaching everybody in your family, including your partner and yourself, like, this is how our family does this.
Right.
Our family, we value dinner time. So we sit down as a family and we eat dinner at this time every night because that's something that we value. Or we really
Mm-hmm.
value honoring and respecting our sleep. So our sleep routines are very rigid, like in our family, they were very rigid. We never deviated from it. Very rarely. Like we just that was it. We held the line on the sleep routines because it was so important for me, for all of us, to get our quality sleep, including most especially those kids.
Yes.
So we're just modeling for them that this is the way of the world, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're just like I don't know, somebody who's like just some free spirit living like on an island somewhere or
Yeah.
whatever.
Nope. Nope.
Everybody has the constraints of things like a job or time. We all have
Schedules.
yeah,
Yeah.
constraints of money, constraints of things. And so it's not to say that one is better, worse, bad, or whatever, and everybody has to do what's best for them. But to teach these things early on is so critical. And it starts literally from the beginning of their lives. You're
Mm-hmm.
teaching them how you want them and how to live in your family, and when you're a healthy family like yours, like you're modeling for them what the real world looks like. And this becomes so critical as they get a little bit older. Like now you have at least one, I think now that's like school age, right? So like when you
Yeah.
start to get into school, you're even more in like a real world situation because now you're on like the school day schedule. You have to listen to the
Right.
teacher. This is the rhythm of the day. And if your child can't function in, short of a lot of reasons why somebody couldn't do that, but if you can't function in the rhythm of the day like that and kind of like abide by those boundaries, it's going to be really tough for them as they get a little older and start merging into adolescence and then beyond to be able to be productive and healthy adults.
Right. Yeah.
So
It starts so early,
it does.
and you can really see like the difference between, I mean, everybody has different rules, right? And everybody has what they do and what they value is different, from one family to another. But implementing those things early on, that is what your child thinks is normal, right? That's what is normalized to them. So those schedules or whatever that you're doing, that carries on into just what they think is normal to them and their life. They're going to carry that throughout their whole life.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's kind of what I hope is happening with my
Mhm.
sobriety, like, and my 8-year-old is old enough to know kind of what's going on, and he knows I'm sober. He knows I don't drink, but he can see other families where parents are drinking in front of their kids. And he said, like, that would scare me if that was happening, or like so he can see the difference. And I just hope, you can only hope that they're seeing what you're doing and seeing how that is playing a positive impact in your life. And then hope that they model those same behaviors. Like everyone's, and he says it to me now as an 8-year-old, like, I'm going to be sober when I grow up, mom. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I love that for you. Like, I really hope
Yay.
that for you,
Yeah.
but obviously things change, kids experiment, all of those good things.
Yeah.
But if you are not normalizing it
Mhm.
in your house and it's not a part of your everyday life, then they are going to get used to that same thing and that same way of life. Just, like this, the dinner times and the
Mhm.
bedtimes, and I don't know, do you let them drink soda or whatever? It's the
Exactly.
same. It's
Exactly.
all, yeah, it all is
Yeah.
impacting them. So
Totally agree. And so like what you're doing is you're modeling for them like what your values are. You're starting to, like, those words aren't used. We're not sitting here saying like most people aren't sitting around saying this is our family value. Some people might be. I mean, I think
Right.
it's a great thing to use those words, but you're modeling for them what your values are. So as they're coming up, they're like, and certainly later as an adult, they'll be like, oh, in our family, family time was a big value, or like church was a really important value, spirituality was a value, or travel or education. Like our parents put a ton of money into our education and they really valued that. They made a lot of sacrifices for that. So they're seeing that. So like you're modeling all of that behavior. And then, yes, like normalizing not drinking, I think is just a beautiful experience for us because we live in a society that's still obsessed with drinking and smoking weed and all the things now. And so like, no matter what, as sober people doing sober things, and even if the people around you aren't doing it, like in your home, you're modeling normalizing not drinking, and you're also modeling like, oh, I think about this all the time. Like I go out we could take our kids to concerts, like probably two
Mhm.
big concerts a year or one at least. And we've been doing that since they were little kids. And I mean, maybe not every single year, but a lot, like most years. And I go to concerts and like festivals. I've been to Jazz Fest in New Orleans twice. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but like I have done that. It's all I never need to go there again. But like I did that as a sober person, like I don't need to
Mhm.
drink to have fun. Um,
Right.
However, um, we do live in a world that's still obsessed with alcohol. And so like the young people are going to be exposed to that. And so like coming up, I was like, oh, my kid, I was obsessed with educating my children. Like they were raised in a mostly sober home most of their lives until my husband started drinking again. He's not alcoholic, but he didn't really drink for a long time. And the rest
Mhm.
of my family drinks a lot. So they're around it a lot and can be exposed, but they were mostly raised in a home without a lot of drinking or any, yet they still make their own choices, right? And so like even
Right.
though we educated them and like we talk about it and we constant. So like during adolescence, it becomes such a challenge, and you're not there yet, but you can start to think about it. And I would encourage you to start thinking about like what are those boundaries going to be in your family? Like what is your
Mhm.
tolerance level going to be? And for me, that's when a lot of the emotional part of parenting came in. Like I said to you, it gets very different. The taxation and emotion and the exhaustion of the years you're in right now is just insane. Like it's exhausting because it's physically so challenging. And then once I get to school, all of them that like it's so great. You're like, oh, this is fun. But then the driving, which I loved every minute of it, but it's so taxing. There's just a lot
Mhm.
involved, but it's very fun. But then the emotional piece really comes in, or did for me anyway, like once they got to be like middle school and then into towards high school, when we're facing some of these challenges around like what are we doing about drugs and alcohol,
Yeah.
driving, cell phones, social media, all of these kind of big things. And like you'll have to decide like what is your tolerance level. And I had to do that too. And we had like the rules, and they do it their own way. And for me, that experience has been very, very challenging and in a
Yeah.
variety of different ways. And has challenged my own, not my sobriety, but my own wellness, my own, like, I guess, mental health or whatever, in ways that
Yeah.
I guess I just wasn't expecting. But,
Mhm.
but they did know, like, they knew like where we stood, right? Like,
Right.
we don't allow that. However,
Yeah.
I know that where they're going, they're doing that. And so, like,
Yeah.
that's really hard too, because you're like, and some parents maybe do clamp down and make, they did it harder than us, and they're like, well, then you're not going there, or you're not doing that, or whatever. And
Mhm.
we weren't those people. Like I just knew that the risks of doing that for me were like
Yeah.
probably greater. So I had to let go of some of this idea that I could like control that, and
They're
and
gonna do what they wanna do,
trust.
like,
Yeah.
right.
And they do what they want to do, and they do drink, and they do whatever, and that is their
Mhm.
choice, and hopefully they don't have a problem, and we talk about it a lot. And um but that was challenging. Like that was challenging in those years when you're still like in control of them. Like before they graduate high school, you're still in charge of them, you know?
Right.
And like what are you going to do in your family?
Yeah. But even I think it's what you just said, even having those conversations about addiction and how this can all play out. And
Yep.
you're like living proof of it, you know? So whereas a lot of other teenagers might not have that example in their family, I certainly did not growing up. I thought that it was so normal to drink at a young age and and have parties. Like we were the party house. We were the ones doing it, and that was normal. So I was drinking at a young age just because I could, you know, like I didn't have any rules or boundaries on me. So I think that when you grow up in a house like that, you're more likely to develop a problem because you're starting so much earlier than other, you know, kids are, or you're doing it more often. And that just leads to a dependency on that, whether it's mental or physical or both, you know, that just becomes normal to you.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely, I mean, my kids are 8, 4, and 3, but I'm already thinking about those
Yeah.
things, and what kind of house this is going to look like and what our rules are going to be. And obviously I'm not blind to the fact that they're their own people and they're going to make those decisions, but you know, like you just have to kind of let them do their thing, just hope that you've taught them enough and
Yeah, I mean,
hope
then it
and pray for
becomes
the
different.
best.
Like when you get to the other, like what I love about the younger ages where where you are is they are still like super innocent. They haven't reached any of that like prepubescent stuff yet where they're really like questioning authority and like starting to push back. And but you get to lay that foundation, you know, you're just layering on. Like again, they're seeing you not drink. They're seeing the way you're running your family. They're seeing the way you speak to other people, the language you use. You know, are you out and on the streets with the other moms, like gossiping about the other kids or the other mom? Are you out there with your, like, you don't have your little glitter cup, you know, with the straws that all the other mommies have that have vodka and whatever else in them? And like
Mhm.
they can see all that, which is so great. And then as
Yep.
they start to emerge, but like one of the things around like kind of influence that I think the other thing is what we're talking about a lot is influence is like
Yep.
continuously figuring out, and a lot of this has to do with between you and your husband, what are our values, you know, as a family. There's a really good book. I'll plug it. It's called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. I don't know if you have any girls, but
Okay.
I would
I've
highly
never heard
recommend
of
it for
that.
your husband. My
Yeah.
mother gave it to all of the son-in-laws several years ago for like a Father's Day gift. And it's written by a female pediatrician. It's excellent. And it goes through all of her work with adolescent girls in her practice and what she consistently heard. And she talks about
Mm,
this very thing, like you better darn well get with your husband and be clear on what is our rule about this, all the things we're talking about, like early on, because in 5 seconds it like starts to switch over and then all of a sudden it's coming into your world when you're like, oh, but she's only in
ugh,
6th grade. And you're like,
yeah.
why are we dealing with it? So like it was really great because it just gets your juices flowing and you're like, maybe you didn't realize that your partner actually wasn't in the same line with you,
Mm,
you know? And so that's the other
yeah.
part of this parenting thing. And like a clear mind and a sober life helps a lot too, because when you're firing on all cylinders, the two of you can have those difficult conversations that might actually bring up a little bit of conflict. If one person
Yeah.
is kind of like, well, I don't agree with that, or I don't think they should have that. And like, how do you have to get in alignment. And so the more that you guys are doing that, the better off your kids will be. Cause like, even if you disagree, you can probably do that, you know, privately and like come together to them in
Right.
agreement. And then you can start saying things like that is in accordance to those rules slash values slash boundaries. Like when you go off to middle school and mommy's working, you're gonna come home from school and you'll get your sister off the bus or whatever. Like
Yeah.
when mom goes has
Planting
to,
those seeds.
yeah, you start to use that kind of language. Like when you graduate from
Mhm.
high school and you go to college, if that's your thing, or like, and you go right to work or whatever. And, you know, like we say all the time, like when you graduate college and get your own apartment and you do this, and that, like when you buy your own car, like we start, and we
Right.
know obviously things are not like things happen, right? I mean, but we set up a lot of that stuff from very, just with the language we used, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like when you're 16 and you get your license, we expect that you'll be working so you can pay for your insurance. You know, like
Yeah.
that stuff starts from a really young age,
Right.
and the clarity you have today and with your partner lets you be able to give that to them. Just such a blessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're already, I mean, with my 8-year-old, like, which is crazy that with an 8-year-old, you have to have these conversations, but we talk about the social media and the phone thing already.
Yeah.
Because a lot of his friends are already getting cell phones and all that
Absolutely.
stuff. And I'm like, no, we're not doing any of that. But so I'm like, Lyric, when you start to drive or when you have friends that you're riding with, that's when you can get a phone. And
Yeah.
like, that's going to be our hard rule.
Yeah.
And,
And then you can establish all that, like when you have our phone, like whatever your rules are, like when you
yeah,
do have a cell phone, it's going to be a community thing. Like we are, if this is what you want, like we're going to be, like kind of monitoring that until we can
right.
trust you. Like every time,
Mhm.
and and a lot of that starts with like where you are now, things that are so simple. Like when you get home from school, I expect that you're gonna look in your folder and know what your work is and
Yeah.
get going on it. Like that's not my job to do that. Like
Yeah.
that's your job. But so many people I feel like kind of they miss the mark on a lot of that. And then suddenly
Right.
now you have like a 13-year-old that like doesn't
And
know
you're
how to
trying to
control.
backpedal and you're like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
starts
You have to
now.
like set those expectations early on,
Yeah.
and they might not always like it, but I really think that kids thrive on consistency and knowing what's expected of them and what's going to happen. That actually makes them feel really safe.
Yeah.
So, having those things that they can rely on, whether they like them or not, I think it actually is a really positive thing for them. So
So
having
true.
those conversations and setting those expectations early, even if it's like years down the road, then there's no surprises and everybody's on the same page. And
Yeah.
like, I think it's really, really
Yeah, it's
important to
always,
do
you
that.
can always refer back to it. And so it always gives you something to say. Cause this is, I'm sure you've already heard this a little bit, like when they were saying, well, like at Johnny's house, we get to play video games all night long when I spend the night there. Or when I go there, I get to eat Rice Krispie treats for dinner or what, like,
Mm-hmm.
so like you're already starting to say like in our home, like this is how we do it.
Right.
So like
I
you're
always
setting that
like
all
the
up.
thing that I say is different houses, different rules, like
Yeah.
constantly. That's like
Yeah.
my go-to thing.
Exactly. So I'm curious
Yeah.
a little bit more on the emotional piece of things as it relates to your sobriety, because you are still kind of just learning this, right? Even though it's been 20 months, it's still kind of a newish experience. And also,
Yeah.
I would imagine socially, like you mentioned, it's been a challenge because your group was drinkers and things. But when the
Yeah.
questions of parenting come up, because there are a lot, even with the younger ones, right? Whether it's, them dealing with a particular problem or whether it's just the mental exhaustion of just parenting kids at that age, or maybe there's like a health concern or some kind of issue going on with one of the kids. When those like emotional experiences come up for you around parenting, what is working for you these days? Like, how do you handle that today? I mean, you're not drinking and driving, so like, what are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, really it comes back to those things that I implemented. Um, I'm a really big fan of deep breathing these days,
Okay, breath
and
work. Yeah.
just, yeah, a lot of breath work. The meditation, honestly, if I don't do it in the morning, I can feel the difference all
Mhm.
day long. Like I'm just more short-tempered and don't have as much patience with not only my kids, but just like with anything in general. I'm just
Yeah.
more quick to like get irritated. And I guess just a big thing for me now that I didn't do in the past is self-care. And that can be like anything, but one big thing is just like once a month, I go out to dinner with my girlfriends,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you need that time like with like-minded people, friends, moms that, know exactly where you're coming from because they're going through the same exact things at the same time,
Mhm.
having those relationships and, you know, really leaning on other people, is
Nice.
really important. I used to not have like a core group of people that I could go to with issues that I was having or whatever. And just being able to have people that you can rely on to unload all of that on,
Yeah.
and they have great feedback for you, or just simply they're just listening to you. That's so important.
Yeah.
So
I
doing
love that.
that, taking, time for myself
Mhm.
is actually really beneficial for me as a parent and my kids.
Absolutely. So I'm
Yeah.
curious about your business because you've been sober now, like you've got the clarity of mind, your
Yeah.
brain, your fog is lifted, right? And you had this brilliant idea to create a community for
Yeah.
yourself, but also for other sober women. So can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like and how it works?
Yeah. So, I mean, I really just wanted to create a space for, and it can be really anybody. So it's geared towards the sober and recovery community to give them a space. But I say it's for the sober curious, or just really people who want to take a night off of drinking. And, they can come to our events. They are based in, I'm in like the suburbs of Indian Land, South Carolina, but it's right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. So a lot of the events take place there, or I try to spread them around as much as I can so that people in different areas can come and enjoy them too. But we really do anything and everything that that is considered real life fun. Like we just have a good time. We have done like roller skating events. We've done kombucha tasting and yoga events. Um, we have a coffee tasting coming up. We had like a pool party event. And I love just meeting new people and seeing new faces come. It's more and more people are coming, and it is hard to like get out of your comfort zone and put yourself out there and introduce yourself to new people. It's so hard, but that's kind of like the point of the whole thing, right? So yeah, and I mean, just I love when a person comes to one of my events and says, I'm not sober, but I'm sick of just doing the same things over and over, or going to the same bars, and where everything is just so focused on the alcohol itself. It's like, what are we even doing? What is fun anymore? So I just love to do things where we can just get to know each other and laugh and have a good old time and like lean into our childlike wonder and be silly. And it's been awesome. Like it's been so much fun getting to meet everybody and bringing like new people together every time.
Okay, that's amazing. I just love
Yeah.
that. And there's so many women who are doing such incredible work. I know another woman, she was on the podcast before we took our little summer break, and I could link you guys up actually. She runs a similar, she wanted to create a community as well. And so she created like
Mm-hmm.
I guess an event business, yeah, where they do a ton of stuff, very, very similar. And but she also has connections with the non-alcoholic drink companies. So she does a lot of
Oh,
like that stuff. Like, so she brings like the bar to the events,
yeah,
which
I
is
love that.
pretty awesome. And I
Mm-hmm.
just know there's so many women that are doing this kind of work because we know that lots of people aren't drinking anymore for a variety of reasons. Some of them are like us, like they're problematic drinkers. Some of them are just for a health reason. Some of them just know now that it's poison and that nobody should drink alcohol. It's literally not healthy for anybody. And
Right.
so that's why the non-alcoholic drink space is exploding out of control. And
Yes.
these younger people aren't drinking either. So um, I love what you're doing. And I think it's just such a necessary thing for us to continue to normalize not drinking. So thank you so much for your work. And thank
Thank
you for
you.
being
Yeah.
here. I really appreciate your
Yes.
time and your
It's
talent.
been
Where do
so
you like people
fun.
to connect with you if they want to reach out?
My Instagram is a great place for people to come. Like, and I post all my events on there. They're also linked through my link tree on there. So that's sober.sisters.events on Instagram. But I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I have a website, sobersisters.events.com. So yeah, and you message me and I will for sure get right back to you because I love chatting and connecting with anybody and everybody.
Awesome. I'll make sure I link that in the show notes below. So thank you again so much for being here with us and sharing your
Thank
story.
you.
And I'll look forward to our worlds crossing again soon.
Yes.